Okay, so David, you are,
Yep.
as you said at the beginning of the show, the lead programmer of Wolfire Games, of Overgrowth, I should say, and the founder of Wolfire Games. So, just to start off, can you, just so we can get a bit of a background of who you are and what you've done, just tell us a bit about your history in game development?
Well, when I was growing up, I had a Mac, and there weren't very many games for it. So I started getting into trying to make my own games using HyperCard, like choose your own adventure games, and then just kept on going from there, and made a few games for the UW game contest for Mac game programming, like Black Shades and Lightning Shadow and GL Fighters, and then made Lugaru, the rabbit fighting game, which Overgrowth is a successor to.
Yeah. When you started out programming, like I know a lot of people are probably wondering this. This is a big question in many topics, but how would you recommend people actually start programming if they want to do that?
Well, I think modding is a really good place to start because you can see dramatic results really fast. Like if you take a game and you just multiply the number of bullets coming from your gun by 100, then you can start making dramatic explosions everywhere.
Yeah,
And so modding is good because it's a lot more exciting than making your first like hello world printf function in C.
yeah,
So
exactly.
that's a nice place to start. So I'd probably go from modding to one of the easier to use engines. Like all engines are hard to use just because games are hard to make, but using something like Unity or Game Maker or something like that could be a good place to go on after you make mods. Because they're somewhere like halfway between programming games and making mods.
hmm
And then eventually you'd probably find that kind of restrictive at some point, and then you want to start making your own things from a lower level.
Yeah,
Or not. A lot of games are made just completely using these engines.
yeah. I'm. A lot of people actually only make games on. I guess you could call them. Um, I don't remember the word, but they're higher up. Like they're not very deep. You know the word, right?
Like higher
They
level
use,
games.
yeah, high level language, is that a word?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean some people only use, for example, Game Maker, and you make games for Game Maker, and they're very successful. And I haven't used Game Maker, for instance, myself, but apparently you can do some pretty cool stuff with it. So that's nice.
Because in
Okay.
the end, that's the point of contact with the players. Like, the players don't really care how you made it. They just care that it's fun to play.
Yeah, exactly.
So, unless you really need some kind of custom technology, there's not much point in making your own engine.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'm talking about when you went from Luguru to Overgrowth. What aspects of Luguru did you want to keep and build on? And are there any aspects of Luguru that you felt like were bad decisions or that you shouldn't have put in Luguru to begin with?
Um, well, one thing I want to keep is the whole open level idea. So you have a level and you have a goal, and then it's up to you how you approach it instead of having any scripted events or tight corridors. So I'd like to keep that in Overgrowth. The main problem I thought with Lugaru was just I didn't have enough time to add more higher level mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
So that there's always the one objective, which is to defeat everyone, or to get from point A to point B. I didn't have much time to explore all different variations on things you could do.
Yeah, and Luguru was like that. It was a very. I think that's why people liked it. I actually think that's one of the reasons a lot of people liked it was because it was simple and easy to grasp, but still the combat mechanisms were so deep they made up for the rest of the game.
Yeah, but I'd like to make the rest of the game better in this one.
Yeah, that's cool. So talking about that, like, what do you think is the most important part of a video game to you?
Well, there are a lot of different layers to video games, and the best ones are strong on every layer. A lot of games now, they only have the one layer because it's just easier to make a game that way. Like in something like Gears of War, they just have each encounter is kind of separate, and you just have to go through the corridor. You have your regenerating health, so you always have the same starting health, and you have your very plentiful ammo, so you don't have to worry about preserving ammo. And there's just the one mechanic. But I like it when there's a lot of different layers which kind of interact and add some context to what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like Mount and Blade is kind of fun because it really matters what you do.
Yeah.
And you can kind of feel pride in starting out a battle in a good way because you like manage to scrounge up really good weapons and a good team, and then you can go in and exploit that advantage.
Yeah. It's nice. So it's the like intertwining and combining of a lot of elements to create a game that you think is important.
Yeah, like in Lugaru, like the point of the open level design in Lugaru and Overgrowth, and also in a lot of other games like Deus Ex and so on, is that once you start a fight, you have all your fight mechanics, which make that kind of fun. But it's also fun just to pick that context for the fight. So if you sneak up behind someone and kill them, then it's not because they just happen to be placed facing away from you on a scripted corridor. You actually had to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting. I'd like to add some more higher level layers like that in Overgrowth. Like group dynamics and levels of violence and things like that.
Cool.
In terms of levels of violence, you've talked a lot about options for non-lethal confrontation or endings to confrontation. Is that going to still be a fairly prominent aspect that you can play in the game?
I'd like it to be, and it's hard to tell how much I'll have time to actually make. But I'd like to have people pay a lot of attention to how much violence you're using and to the context of each fight. So one thing I don't like in action stealth games is where people see you and they immediately just start trying to kill you. Like they never have any trouble deciding if you're a friend or an enemy, or how much force they're willing to use to kill you, or whether they want to risk their life on a confrontation. So I think it'd be cool for them to keep track of how dangerous they think you are and how much they would like you dead. And like, are you threatening their lives, or are you just a job? Like they're a guard, they've been hired to do something, and they have to weigh how much that money is worth versus how likely you are to kill them.
Are we likely
Right.
to see a wage parameter in Overgrowth then?
I think it'd probably be more like a motivation parameter. Like a threshold at which they decide this isn't worth it.
Cool.
And if they decide it's not worth it, is it something where they would actually submit, give up, or is it something where they then try and find someone else to help them like it currently is in the game? Or is it, or would there be other options for how a character can sort of give up? Do they just run away? And and as if everyone is in runaway mode, then you've beaten the level?
Yeah, I think that depends a lot on what the objective is. Like if your objective is to actually kill everyone, then you really don't want them to run away. So you'd probably want to be as unscary as possible, or something like that. But
I
if your
see.
objective is to steal something and then get away, then it might be a good idea to try and scare them.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
Overgrowth could be like a social experimentation game almost.
It's easy to design things in theory. The hard part will be actually making it work.
Yeah.
Right, especially with the sort of current level of interaction, response that you get back from the characters. There's not necessarily a definable way to read how a person feels about you in the game. And so I imagine designing a mechanic to give that away that's not, charts or graphs or something like that. If it's body language or some other, yet to be defined parameter that tells you how you should expect to confront an enemy will be interesting. Have you thought about that yet, or any...
How to tell how people feel about you?
Yeah, and any way to sort of read a situation before, like if you say you were going to, in sort of a typical Lugaru fashion, there's an encampment with raiders and you have to go in and you have to, as you're planning to go in and do whatever it is you're planning to do, meet your objective, can you from a distance somehow read the level of the intention of the opponents, or is it going to still sort of be a little bit of guesswork?
Well, the only thing you can tell from far away would be what they're equipped with and how they're moving. So I think you'd have to have a lot of it in the context for the level. Like if the level is about you're just sneaking up on a random raider encampment, they probably wouldn't be super motivated because they don't have anything to defend, really. It's just a campfire and a tent or something.
Sure.
So they would probably only attack you if they're pretty sure that they're going to win.
I see.
I think it'd try and rely a lot on the context, but it'd also be like if they have swords and you're unarmed, they'd probably be pretty confident.
Makes sense. Some people in the chat have mentioned ear position. Have you ever considered that as an identifying placement, some way to give away emotion in the game?
Yeah. I'd like to do that especially for stealth, because you're going to be pretty close to them anyway. So then you'd actually be able to see more subtle details like that. But
if their ears perk up, or placement forward, backward, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I'd like to have more like full body poses, because the game has a pretty wide field of view. Like a lot of games now, they have very narrow field of view because it's more suited to aiming with guns and down corridors. But Overgrowth has very wide field of view, kind of compounded by being third person. So enemies get really small really fast. So you have to have pretty broad expressions to read from any significant distance.
That's true.
I think actually the ears are good for that, because the ears always stand up, or like they stand out from the head, so you know where to look, and they actually define the profile of a character when you look at him. So I think actually ears would be readable from quite the distance.
At least on rabbits.
Yeah,
might be harder
rabbits.
on cats.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah, I think there'll definitely be one aspect to it. But like if they're patrolling around on their rounds and they hear something, they might also just freeze up and kind of act more tense.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But the ears are a good indicator also.
Cool.
I'm sure there will be loads of layers when the game is finished. Looking forward to it. But moving on to another matter. You're the only developer, or the only programmer, I should say, on Overgrowth, and being the only programmer on a project of this size, it can't be easy all the time. So, like,
Just most of the time.
How do you keep your motivation up?
Well, the weekly alpha videos help, because I have to have something cool for the video on Sunday. So that's one way to stay motivated in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
And also it's just like I have to make it good. Like if I don't keep making the game better, then what have I been doing for the last 3 years? It would all be kind of wasted.
Yeah.
So that's a good long-term motivation. So staying motivated isn't really a problem.
I see.
The hard part is to take time to do anything else, really.
Okay. How much do you actually...
I know that feeling.
How much time do you spend on developing Overgrowth, roughly?
Well, I work on it every day for most of the day, but I've been taking Mondays off recently because it's the day after the video. so it seems like a good time to take off.
Yeah. I think you should take at least 1 day a week off.
Yeah.
So that's good.
I'm glad to
trying to-
hear that too.
Trying to be able to pay a little more attention to how well I think I'll be able to focus once I'm working. Because if I'm not going to be able to focus anyway, then I might as well just take an extra day off. Do something fun to recuperate instead.
Mm-hmm.
But that's always a problem. Not just with game programming, but anything that's self-directed. You have to manage yourself effectively.
Yeah, that's kind of why I'm asking you, because you seem to, I mean, you've been working for several years on this project and come very far on your own, programming-wise. So a lot of people do not have that discipline to actually do that. So that's why I think it's really interesting, I mean, you in particular on that subject. But, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I've always been working like this, so I don't really know how what's normal.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, you know, all of the projects that start up and then never, you know, get anywhere and stuff like that. That's people just, that's people losing their motivation. Yeah, but do you think what you do on the free time is, on your free time is important to your motivation or your willingness to work on the game? Or is that just, or do you just sit down and work every day and it doesn't matter what you've done previously, or, you know, yeah, you know what I'm trying to ask?
Well, it can depend. Like sometimes I'm inspired by something that I've been doing. Like I've been playing Zelda Skyward Sword recently, and a lot of the lower level mechanics aren't actually good at all, but they do a really good job of layering lots and lots of different mechanics. So you always have this puzzle layer, and then you have the action layer beneath it, and then on top of that you have the constant like upgrade trees, and then you have the actual puzzle related upgrades, like actually finding new items. So they do a really good job of having lots of layers of progression.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes me want to try and do that in Overgrowth, because right now I don't have any layers of progression.
Yeah. But like, if we talk about, do you, for instance, think that it's very important to exercise or something to be able to focus when you work, or like what's your view on those kinds of things? Or do you
Yeah.
advocate like having a very good eating habits, like eating good food, and then you feel like you work better, or?
Yeah, I think those are both actually pretty vital, because also if you don't exercise, you might not be able to sleep very well. You might not have energy to focus, because like your mood is really important when you're doing self-directed work. Like if you're working at Starbucks or something, then you can do your work even if you're sleep deprived and tired and unhappy. But if you're doing some kind of self-directed creative technical thing, then you have to be in a pretty good state to be able to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm in a really bad mood and I sit at the computer, it's a lot easier to get distracted and just like read Reddit or something all day.
Mm-hmm.
So I try and stay in good physical and mental health. That's not always the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, it can be hard. Do you, I think I've heard before that you do martial arts. Is that correct?
I kind of do that on and off, more off than on recently, but I did it for a long time back in school.
Mm-hmm.
And recently I've just been kind of like free trial hopping, because a lot of places in San Francisco, they'll do a 1 or 2 week free trial.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of interested in comparing, contrasting different styles anyway, so I've been trying out different free trials.
Cool. Because Tanjevik from the community had a question asking, you know, what your favorite martial arts movie is.
Nice.
The best one is The Legend of Drunken Master, which is the second Jackie Chan Drunken Master movie.
I mean, your favorite martial arts move.
Oh, moves.
Yes.
I thought you said movies.
I thought you
You
said
go on for a
movies
long
too.
time about movies.
Yeah, I probably did say movies. I'm sorry.
Okay. Martial arts moves. Well,
That's
the guard position is the most important, really. Like keeping your fists up in front of your face. Like you see all these people doing their fancy martial arts, like they're trying to act like they are in movies, but the problem is your reaction speed is just physically, your nerve impulses won't get to your limbs fast enough to actually block an attack. Like blocking is kind of a myth, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So you just have to learn the patterns of like dodging and blocking. So you have a 95% chance of blocking any particular attack.
I see. Cool. But now that we were talking about movies, I don't want to disappoint people. So I'm going to let you finish that one as well. So what's your favorite martial arts movie?
Okay, so my favorite is the Jackie Chan one I was talking about, because it has a really wide variety of different fight scenes and very high quality. Like the one at the end, it took them 5 months to film. Involves like him jumping onto a bed of hot coals, which are actually hot coals, because Jackie Chan is super hardcore like that. And his opponent is actually his personal bodyguard,
Oh, cool.
which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, you wouldn't want anyone else trying to hit him on not purpose.
Yeah. So it was just it's also a really funny movie. Like he actually does good acting in it, which is kind of surprising.
That's cool. I'm gonna have to check it out. I never or very rarely watch movies, so that should be cool.
He also invented his own martial art for it. Like there is no real martial art that's like the one that he does in the movie. So he created his own kind of drunken boxing Hollywood version.
Nice.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. The whole drunken boxing thing is such it's a sort of a myth in the martial arts community, that even within Kung Fu, people have started teaching drunken forms. But I also studied Kung Fu for a long time, and my teacher's like, it's a joke. It's very modern added thing, and based on basically Hollywood, except for Hong Kong films. That's sort of where it came from more than actual use. So
Yeah. The big part of their business is catering to people who want to look like they're in a martial arts movie.
exactly.
Which is cool too, of course. I mean, who wouldn't want to be in a martial arts movie? Like,
Yeah.
really.
I think that real martial arts are cool and Hollywood martial arts are cool, but it's important not to confuse them.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Then you get mugged and you try and do some kind of jump spin kick and you just slip and fall and get stabbed.
Not a good day. And then they take your
Yeah.
wallet.
Yep.
Yep.
Actual fighting on the streets is pretty ugly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a place nearby that teaches Krav Maga, which is one of the more practical martial arts. And always telling you what to do when you get mugged, and it's always just run away.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't
the
matter.
best.
Yeah.
That sounds like advanced martial arts. Like, okay, your opponent is going after you with a knife. What do? Run away. Simple.
Yeah.
Just run away.
The martial arts are for after you've tried to run away and they catch you.
Oh, I
and
see.
You want to have a 20% chance of surviving instead of 10.
Yeah. That's true. That's smart. That's cool. That's nice.
Run away.
So,
Nice.
jumping from one topic to another, we know since a blog post written by Jeff, that you can speed read. And in a recent alpha video, we also saw that you can speed write, or you can write very quickly. And, how?
Well, I don't always type as fast as I look like I'm typing in those videos, because the first and foremost point of the videos is to look interesting.
Mm-hmm. So
I can type
speed it
pretty
up.
fast, but sometimes I'll speed it up.
Because in this video in particular, it looked like you hadn't used any time-lapse at all, which was why people reacted.
Yeah. Recently I saw this video about someone coding an NES emulator. It's a 15-minute video. And he'd actually made a tool-assisted program, because he's a guy who does tool-assisted speedruns of games like Mario, where he beats the whole game of Mario in like 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So he had choreographed every keystroke and then run it through this program. So it looked exactly like he was typing, and he even would copy and paste things instantly.
Mm-hmm.
But he had done it just so he could make it look interesting to do that.
I see. And like, have you? So what are you doing? Are you actually writing that as quickly as it looks like you are, or?
Sometimes I am, but sometimes I'll speed it up a little bit.
Okay, good. And like a related question by Confused from the forums, since you can write quickly, you can read quickly. Can you also speed think?
I don't know. That's a hard one to answer, because you don't really know. There's not really a thinking race that you can enter and see how fast you can think. But one thing I do is I keep a lot more in the short-term memory versus long-term, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, part of why I can't say the changelog is I don't actually know what I changed this week. I usually just go back and look at the subversion commits to see what changed and then write up a changelog. But otherwise, I don't really know for sure.
Oh, I see.
Because everything kind of blends together.
Yeah.
After a little while.
You also you probably also don't think in week-long chunks in terms of what has actually changed, meaning that to you a change you maybe didn't even start a change this week, but it happened to just finish this week and make it into the change log. I totally could see how that would not be that would not be very easy to define. You've sort of been working on all of these things for a long time anyway, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think you have to, back about speed typing, you have to be careful about believing anything you see in a video on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, if I want to, like, I have a little bit of experience doing special effects for movies and things like that. Like, it'd be easy to cut a screen in half and speed up half of the screen. And things like that.
Yeah.
Right. I made a comment about that last week. I think it was the previous week's alpha where you wrote, I think it was 5 lines of text with inside the parameter editor or something for a hotspot. And that was the one where people kind of got really excited. And I said it'd be easy enough to just isolate even that one section just to speed up the typing, even if the background is moving at the same rate.
Mm.
Yeah, specifically it was the one where you demonstrated that you had the scroll bar in the parameter editor. I don't know if you recall that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a cool feature that Jeff had. Jeff added the expanding text bar, and he was really happy with it, because nobody had ever actually done a text box quite like that, that expands itself to a certain limit and then turns into a scroll bar.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very convenient, because most of the time you don't want a constant scrolling bar, but then at the same time you usually won't write so many lines that you need the scroll bar, or that it could all fit. So I agree. I think it's an awesome feature, a great feature.
It's super good.
Jeff is really into user interface design. Like, a while back we weren't sure if we were going to go with Asimium for the UI, so he recreated his own Phoenix UI, which exactly copied the Mac OS X interface using Riehl Basic. And I thought it was cool to be able to have the attention span to do that, like to think that UI is so important.
Yeah. It's a very overlooked aspect of game interface. I mean, not game interfaces, just computing interfaces now. People sort of have forgotten, maybe, so to speak, what computer interfaces used to be like. And even me, at my age, I barely ever had a time where I had a computer without a mouse, although at the beginning I definitely did. And, it's a very different world that we work in terms of user interface. So it's great, I think, having someone on the team that can focus on that aspect of it so specifically.
Yeah.
Yep, that's really cool. We should start with the final questions here so we can finish this up. I wanted to ask you about Desura and Overgrowth, since you're getting the Linux port and all that, and it seems like you're soon going to be on Steam. But since there is no Linux version of Steam, are you in some way planning on using Desura?
I'll probably look into it, but I'll have to see how hard it is, because another thing Jeff does is package up the alphas each week, and every time we add a new alpha distribution method, that adds extra work. So if Desura added an extra couple hours every week, then that probably wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah.
But if it's really easy to do, then sure, that would be cool.
Cool. And how are things on the Steam front?
Steam is still going along. Their Mac tools have some issues, so we're trying to figure out a better way to handle that, because we have to design the process to make each alpha fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm. But it's coming along then. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
It's good.
Still, we haven't forgotten about it.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask... Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in relation to that, people were also asking, you guys had started an auto updater. I believe Jeff was sort of heading that up. Is that still in the works?
We're not really focusing on that right now, especially with if we can get Steam working soon, because Steam already has pretty good auto updating built in.
Right, that was the reason I wanted to ask, is if you would still do it on your own, or if you would sort of start relying on Steam for that function.
Yeah, probably for now, because in the long run it'd be fun to make some kind of open source auto updating project, but I don't know if anybody has time for that right now.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And closing the end, the end is coming even closer. So I'm asking, when you're done with Overgrowth, what do you think? What do you think you'll do when you're done with Overgrowth? Like, do you have any plans right now?
I have a lot of ideas, but it's hard to know what will actually seem most appealing at the time. It might be nice to take a few weeks.
Yeah.
I hope you're able to take more than a few weeks.
Yeah, but one thing I'd like to do that I've been thinking about a lot is making open source game components, because I kind of don't really like the idea of game engines entirely, because a lot of them have different strengths and weaknesses, and the games all end up looking pretty similar. So it'd be nice to be able to have like an open source texture library, source sound renderer, and things like that, and drive them by using them in a game.
It sounds interesting. Would you use portions of what you've done for the Phoenix engine, or would this be something again from scratch?
I definitely use parts of it, but I'd like to make them better. Because everything in Overgrowth is designed specifically for the game. It's not really designed as an engine.
I see.
And the problem with a lot of open source projects is they're not like battle tested. Like nobody's going to use some open source library if it's not been used in something they already are familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like people use Havoc because it's used in every game, and they don't, I think, even bother comparing it to Bullet, because nobody even has a good comparison with it.
Yeah, exactly. That makes sense. I mean, it's like that with a lot of things. Like if something's already used, then people are going to use that just because they know that a lot of people use it, then it works.
Yeah. So I'd like to develop whatever my next projects are using in this kind of modular fashion.
That's cool.
That
Nice.
sounds great.
Yep. And yeah, do you have any more questions, or should I fire the last one?
Well, I have this. I have a list of questions from the chat. If we want to try and go through them, I've about 7 more questions, but I think we definitely should consider wrapping it up here soon. So I probably won't take any more. But I can just go down this list if you still have time, David.
Sure. Yeah, usually all I do today is just make the video. So I'll have some time.
All right. Some people were asking about the sort of communication methods between the main character and the NPCs in terms of. I know that Aubrey has kind of shown off some dialogue bubbles, but they were also asking about voice acting, which I know you and I have had several conversations about, and whether or not you're still considering that route, or if it's kind of not going to happen, or what your thoughts are there.
I'd like to try out some different options first, because voice acting is tough. Like, it's easy to get the voice and the recording done at a high quality, especially with modern microphones and internet and things like that. But getting a good performance is really hard, and it would be really kind of pretentious of me to think that I could do that effectively on my first try. Like, at first I was thinking just taking it seriously would be enough, but I think I'd have to find people who are actually good at directing and acting and writing to end up with anything that's better than what I see in most games.
Right.
Like, there's this common myth, I think, in indie developers that AAA developers are just bad. Like, they don't know what they're doing. But really, it's just that it's really hard to do it.
It's true. It's true. Obviously I work in sort of a related field, not exactly the same, but when I was working on Star Wars, we went to LucasArts, and we saw the people working on all these different languages for the Star Wars games, and it's a lot of work. Not only is it to get a good performance, but how well is it acted, and then in their cases, they even have all these languages, which in some ways help hide the fact that's able to help hide the voice acting some. But then at the same time, you have to get these interesting sounds that have to sound uniform and stuff. And I imagine that I would think that for you to get a consistent performance from different actors would require having some sort of control over how they record it.
Yeah. And then you also, even once you have your masterful voice recording, you have to combine it with the rest of the game, like the animations and things like that.
Right.
Like, some of the very few effective examples of voice acting, like in BioShock and Portal, they're all totally disembodied. Like, I can hardly... The only example of successful voice acting that has a character on screen is probably Uncharted. But they went like all out with that. It was filmed basically in the same way as Avatar, with the mocap and the voice and everything done at the same time, using really high-end actors. And that's
Right.
definitely not something that I can do for Overgrowth. So,
Well, and even to me, it still felt a little disconnected. And I agree that it was good, but I mean, even Avatar, which I haven't actually seen, but I've seen enough of it. Even there, it always feels disconnected to me. They don't feel like it's really coming from that character. So,
yeah.
I think we start getting into the uncanny valley at that point, where I just don't believe it, and it's going to be hard to cross that threshold.
Yeah. So if I had voice acting, it would probably... Like, it would work well for narration. Like, that's pretty tried and true. Like, Bastion is a good example of indie narration that works well. Or Dear Esther.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if narration would be a good fit for Overgrowth at all.
It seems like the wrong
Yeah.
genre, I think.
It's not really a noir game or anything like that.
Right.
Some
go
other
ahead.
example, like there's some other alternatives, like someone just mentioned Magica, where they made up their own nonsense language. But that mostly worked, I think, because it's a comedy game. And
Right.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like English still. I mean, doing a made-up language that sounds like English is almost by default humorous.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you don't want it to be just gibberish, and in that case, then it wouldn't be useful at all, really.
True.
So there's a lot of options to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I certainly know that I've liked some of the concepts that Aubrey has shown off in terms of icons and sort of little text bubbles and things. So those, those will be interesting, I think, to see if they progress, how they progress.
Yeah. The main thing I want to do that makes it hard to do the text boxes is I think that it should be in real time. Like if you want to, you should be able to just punch somebody in the face while they're talking to you if you don't like them. So I don't want villains to be able to make you just like sit through their monologues if they have one. You should be able to actually act, I think.
Right. That's always tricky. I always find that if I cut off a thing, like I always find in those situations where you can interrupt dialogue that I accidentally hit a button and do it by mistake and skip the dialogue that I then wanted to see, and I have no way to go back.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there would be a skip dialogue button. It would just be your normal controls. So if you accidentally like jump kick them in the face, then you have some serious manual dexterity issues.
Yeah, but I mean,
that may be.
You just put your hand on the mouse and accidentally hit the left mouse key, and you accidentally kick them in the stomach.
Yeah.
It's stop making fun of me. Oh,
I was serious though.
I know.
Yeah, that happened for me in Bloodlines a lot. Vampire the Masquerade, because they have left click is continue dialogue and it's also shoot. So often I'd be clicking too much and I'd accidentally just pull out my gun and shoot somebody in the face who I'm talking to.
Nice.
I think they put that in the game like on purpose so that the game would like reflect your feelings towards them talking to you, since you're skipping the dialogue so quickly.
Either that or they just want a bunch of replay value, you know. I didn't get this line, I have to go back and see it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you'll be able to go back and revisit any level individually. So it shouldn't be a big deal if you miss something the first time.
Okay.
It's cool.
We'll try and keep moving forward a little. There's been a lot of questions about sort of the future of what you plan to do. We sort of talked a little bit about the Phoenix engine. You said your modular thing. People are asking if Black Shades 2 might ever come out. If you think you'll be doing any more design tours, just sort of the general future of what your plans are. But I guess you kind of covered that a little.
Yeah, like I don't want to license the Overgrowth engine just because I think it'd be unethical. Like it'd be a bad idea for anyone to license it because it's very specific to this game. I think every engine is very specific to a certain genre. Like Unreal Engine is basically a first-person shooter corridor engine, possibly third-person shooter corridor engine. But it's not actually like there's no such thing as a multi-purpose engine. Like you can't use Unity to make StarCraft 2.
Right.
Or anything like that. You always need the special purpose technology for whatever you're doing. So I think that breaking it down into pieces will be the best way to make reusable code.
That makes sense. Would you ever design another game in Phoenix Engine?
Maybe. And I'd probably break it down first and reuse parts of it. because
All right.
a lot of it is probably not applicable.
Sure. Unless it's Overgrowth 2.
Yeah. There's a lot of parts that definitely might be, like the blood system or the terrain rendering, things like that.
Sure. Yeah, I think the blood system could work well in a first-person shooter.
Yeah.
You
Some-
I think every game should use it.
Yeah, you should keep the blood system and just, even if the game you're developing does not contain blood, you should still improve the blood system, and in the end you'll end up with something insane.
Yeah. Perfect
I'm
blood
gonna-
system.
Right. I'm gonna skip a couple here, but I'm gonna ask. Probably, I definitely don't want. We shouldn't discuss specifics, but people are curious if you've been working on the story for the game. I know that you've talked about, or at least what I've heard is you guys are waiting until you know what you can make with the game before you start really focusing on the story. But how is there anything? I mean, are you guys moving forward with that? This asked specifically if the comic was going to end up at all in the story, and if you have any comments on that.
Well, so far we've mostly been thinking about like how will the story work and what is it about, in the sense of like what is it actually about, not what happens in the plot. So it's kind of more important for us to plan out the different themes and structure of the story. It's more important than the actual logistics of the plot, I think.
That makes sense.
Some basic ideas. We definitely want to have more like fundamental ideas. Like the Nintendo strategy is always your guy pursuing a princess or other desirable female, and then she gets taken away, so you have to get her back. And that's pretty basic, but it actually works a lot better than most game stories. They tend to get really convoluted and silly.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to keep some simple sort of archetypal stories and explore other ones besides the rescuing the princess, but the same kind of simplicity to the basic idea of each arc.
Right. I think that's a reasonable and realistic goal, to be honest.
Agreed. I concur. Are there any more questions?
I think we will probably stop with that. I mean, I can ask. The other ones were if you have any thoughts on the philosophy of parkour, which of its heart is the art of running away, or if you ever watch any of the fan videos. If you still have plans for the animatics, and maybe the parallax renderings that you created. Those are the three left. That if you want to answer any of those.
Well, I should probably do one at a time because they're not really related.
No. But do you want to answer all of them? I mean, I feel like we've had you talking for quite a bit, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. So did any of those kind of catch your attention? Something that you feel like you could comment on?
Well, the animatics are one idea for replacing dialogue. Like have people kind of talk in mini cutscenes. Inspired a little bit by Machinarium, which handled dialogue in a similar way.
Yes.
And philosophy of parkour of running away. I think that's a good idea.
Well, I mean that is the philosophy of parkour. The sort of reason it was invented was you want to get as much as possible the fastest way from point A to point B, and if you feel like that really plays a role in the overgrowth setting.
Yeah, well, the characters in Overgrowth are extremely athletic, so they always move around like that because that's just the most efficient way for them to go. And parkour is basically to free running as martial arts are to Hollywood martial arts. So, and Overgrowth were kind of somewhere in between those. Like, it's still definitely Hollywood stuff. Like, you jump and you flip all over the place. But I'm trying to have more of a core idea that's more towards the realistic version.
Sure. So it's a little more realistic to jump a couple times up a wall, but not to like leap, I don't know, huge buildings or something.
Yeah. I kind of want the flashiness to tie into the enemy AI a little bit. Like if you're doing some kind of crazy flashy stuff, then you might be more intimidating than if you just do things in the most efficient and straightforward way.
That makes sense.
Cool. So it's kind of like in Luger where you would flip and they would be like, oh, for a moment.
Yeah.
So
Like
you
in
have time to
Lugar, you
stab
could
them in
do
the back.
you could do the wall kick, but it wasn't actually much more effective than a normal kick. But it's a lot more dangerous. So I think to balance that out, you could have it more impressive. Like maybe sometimes you're fighting and your goal is to impress somebody instead of actually to kill everyone or to get somewhere. So if your goal is actually to impress everyone, then you probably want to do a lot of flashy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I really miss the wall kick, I gotta be honest. I keep waiting for that to be in Overgrowth.
It's a nice one.
I actually felt that it worked really well on groups of people because it was an easy way to sort of get away, do the kick, and sort of run away again.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's just me.
So that's it. Any more questions from you?
I think we should probably wrap them up. You should ask your final question.
Yes, I have actually one very very fast question before the last question that I just remembered. I saw a tweet that you made. I think you retweeted it actually, and it said that you had actually implemented ambient occlusion in Overgrowth.
Oh yeah, screen space ambient occlusion.
Yes, is that something we're going to see in the game, or did you just do it for fun and then throw it away?
I'm probably going to keep it like the cascading shadows are now, so it's mostly useful for editing to get a preview of how it will look when you bake everything down. Because just getting the screen space ambient occlusion working is one thing, but getting it to work like really fast and really compatibly in the production code is going to be a lot harder.
I see.
So I don't know if I want to spend the time to do that.
Okay. Well, that answers that question. And then the final question that everyone on Overgrowth Weekly who we interview here gets. If you were a part of the Overgrowth universe, if you lived in the Overgrowth universe, what animal race would you be? From the ones that do exist or another one in Overgrowth. So what race would you be and what would you be doing?
That's a tough question.
Yes.
Well, I think the rabbits are the most creative in that world, or in general. So I'd probably be one of them doing some kind of artistic thing.
Cool. Nice. All right. Thanks for being on the show, and thanks for being in the interview and all that.
It was very interesting.
Thanks for inviting me.
Nice. Yes, it was great having you. So, all of you, thanks for watching, and we will see you next week.
See you guys.
Bye.